Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy, I'm very glad, I'm proud to present the Swiss National Park as an example. Always when I hear Andre, and then I go home and tell my people what we should do, what IUCN thinks we should do in a national park, they tell me, but we are just 40. We are just 40 people in the national park. We are not able to do everything. So I bring back you to practice a little bit and tell how we handle all these goals IUCN is creating. All or not all, I just do it from the bottom up. Current state, the past and the future lessons learned. And to avoid to run out of time, I present you the lessons learned at the beginning and then I argue how we learned it. It needs courage, trust in the power of nature and good arguments toward the stakeholders to allow natural processes, wilderness, scientific research on ecosystem structure and dynamics in the area is a key for acceptance. It ensures the information activities toward all stakeholders. That's the first lesson we learned. The second one is the consistent and politically independent dedication of the Strategic Commission of the Swiss National Parks in terms of the protection process was a key of success. But it needs a careful audit of new or possibly corrected ecological and socio-political knowledge. Sometimes time has changed attitudes. On setbacks followed success stories. And the third one, to have only one national park in Switzerland set in a high alpine area in Switzerland might to be a disadvantage. But as a 100-year-old IUCN 1A protected area, it serves as an ideal model worldwide for nature conservation in its strict sense. That's the important lesson we learned. We have to work internationally. And the word national park doesn't mean it's only for a nation. It's a global issue, protected areas and protected area conservation. So if you don't know where the Swiss National Park is, I brought you this image in the middle, in the dark. It's a Swiss National Park. I think Prague is somewhere here. Here. That's an issue in Europe. Before you have seen Andre's map of the protected areas, and I show you where is space for large protected areas in Europe. And the Swiss National Park is located in one of the dark places left in Europe. It was founded in 1914, the Swiss National Park. It's a 1A IUCN category area, so it's not a national park in the sense Andrei Sovinc explained before. It's a wilderness area with the main purpose of research. It's 17,000 hectares. 4 municipalities own still the area from 1,400 to 3,200 meters, so it's on a high alpine level with about 30% forest still. 80 kilometers of trail, I come back to this, only 150,000 visitors per year, but those are the visitors, they really visit the park, they not just come to the key points of the park. And the organization is not governmental, it's an NGO founded and supported mainly by the government. And as I said, we are currently 41 persons with 25 full employees equivalents. That's the fact. And the national park itself is this 17,000 hectare area together with a regional natural park in the southeastern part of the park and a buffer zone in the north of the park. The whole system is a biosphere reserve according to UNESCO. That's the first network we create. Also here in Italy, our neighbor is Stelvio National Park in Italy. So it's a similar system you have in the Czech Republic. It's quite common that the national parks are at borders to other countries because that are the remote areas left for nature conservation. We have also a network of protected areas in Switzerland. The Swiss National Park is the only national park. as a IUCN Category 1 area. There is a project on a IUCN Category 2 area in the southern, 2 projects in the southern part of Switzerland, and there is a network of natural parks according to IUCN. It's Category 5. And to finish the thing of the network, we also collaborate in the Alpine network of protected areas, where you can see the map here. So there is a large part of the Alps are protected. Andre was also discussing how they are protected. Is this a buffer zone? Is this a core zone? Do we have no intervention? Do we have intervention? It's just this, this image. The important part is that you collaborate. That's what I want to emphasize here. But back to the national park, it's an old story about founding the Swiss National Park. But if I tell you a few words about it, you will recognize it's a totally current story about it. There were 2 or a few people that had the idea in the beginning of the 20th century to create a national park in Switzerland. On the left, you see Mr. Coasco. Mr. Coasco was the first governmental inspector on forestry in Switzerland. When the national park was founded, he was 88, and he was still in charge. And on the right side, you see Professor Schröter from the ETH in Switzerland. So he was a researcher. They had the idea to find an area in Switzerland where they could create a national park, not according to the ideas from the United States, more on the scientific purpose. And Professor Schröter had a vision in 1914. He said, all previous changes on the original state over centuries, the long-term effects of the hunters, fishermen, foresters, agriculturists, shepherds, and movers will disappear over time, and the old original community of life will be restored. A great wilderness experiment will be performed there. I think there are 2 things that are very, very important. One, he was aware that's not virgin. It's not primary forest. It was used over centuries. And to be honest, I don't think there are many parts in Europe which are still primary, even if we think about it, because we have to think at the starting point. 20,000 years ago, over the Swiss National Park, you had an ice shield of 900 meters. This is probably not what you want to reach. So think about what is the state today. So he was aware it was used by humans, and he wanted to have an experiment back to wilderness or toward wilderness. And the goal, what this means, they let it open. They said, we create a non-intervention zone. Non-intervention in the area does not mean no management, but no intervention. We let natural processes do, even if we think something is going wrong. Could be. But what is wrong in nature? This is the second important thing. There is no goal defined. What is the final stage of nature in the Swiss National Park? It's an open story still after 100 years. And this is the result you see after 100 years in nature. It hasn't changed a lot. Even the thinking that this meadow within the forested part will disappear, covered by forest, has not happened fully. And there are some reasons we know today from research, and we have to discuss what is the stage. Who tells you that the end is forest in a succession process? It's not true, probably. So the governance was also important. The whole bunch of professors came in this time, and the local people said, you want to protect nature? We fight against nature. We want to kill the bear. We want to survive 1914. We do not need nature protection. We need development. So they had to discuss, and the Swiss National Park was happy to have a PhD student at the ETH from the region who had the right connections. This was the PhD student from Professor Schröter, and this was the connection between science and local stakeholders. Steven Bruniers on the right, he was then, after that, also for 30 years, the first director of the Swiss National Park. In 100 years, the Swiss National Park had 6 directors. And this was a scientific nature conservation justification already. So they thought we have to make some maps here on the tree species, some distribution maps to argue what we want against local people, but also against the government, all the stakeholders. And they have needed also local connections. You cannot create a national park without acceptance from local people. You can dedicate a perimeter, but it's not a national park. It's nothing which will work, really, in the sense we all want to have it. So Courtin-Grasse, Council of Cernetz, the main municipality, was brother-in-law of Steven Bruniers, by accident, you know. So the area where the national park was created was really heavily also defined on these connections. Because he gave the Val Cloza to the area of the national park. It was his hunting area. He said, okay, I give up hunting, but I build a small hut in the area where I can have some visitors. They pay me a little bit for staying overnight, and I will show them the nature. And the first park ranger, he wrote back, instead of idyllic alpine valleys, I found a devil valley without a green spot. That was his impression, and he was in charge for 1 day, first ranger. And another important stakeholder, or other important person, was Paul Sarrazin. Paul Sarrazin wanted to create also an international union of nature conservation, but he was stopped by the 2 world wars. But he created the Swiss Schweizerische Bund für Naturschutz to finance the whole system, because a national park without finances, without management, is not a national park. But he realized you cannot do it on private means and private money. So at the end, 1914, after 15 years of process to create a national park, even in the early 20th century, the act on the Swiss National Park was signed by Governor people, by the Minister of Switzerland. They visited the Swiss National Park in July 1913 and said, yes, we create a national park, a national monument in the southeastern part of Switzerland. And 27th March 1914, the act was signed. And I just remember, I think it was also from one of my previous speakers, he emphasized that the idea creating national parks was not the only done in Switzerland in this time. There were also some initiatives in all the countries, but the First World War stopped all these initiatives the next 6 months. In this context, Switzerland was just happy to be 6 months in advance to the others. And then most of the countries, they stopped all these conservation issues until the 50s, the 1950s, 60s. That's just to make this clear. And today, these buildings here are the headquarters of the Swiss National Park. As I said, there was a creation of a national park for scientific purposes. It was very important, and is still important. So we had this natural process. On one hand, we still have in the act and in the law of the Swiss National Park no intervention, but really serious scientific accomplishment and public relations. These are the 3 main goals of the Swiss National Park. There is nothing written about tourism. There is nothing written about recreation. And as a human, you are just a guest. You are allowed to do nothing, really nothing. So it's forbidden to leave the marked hiking trails. It's forbidden to carry around natural objects, animals, plants, wood, or stone. It's not allowed to bring your dog. It's not allowed to come with winter sport equipment. Also no cycling, no flying machines, or they are prohibited. You are not allowed to swim in the lakes. It's not allowed to make fire. it's not allowed to camp, and the natural environment should not be changed. We have not a two-zone system, as I said. The whole 17,000 hectares are strictly protected in its strict sense in this one. So you're just a guest, but coming back to the founders, they had this idea as well, but the first thing they did, they reintroduced ibexes. So they have, they were against their own idea. But they thought we bring back the ibex as a symbol for wilderness and nature. And this was 1921. They bought some of these animals from the gamekeeper in the Gran Paradiso area in southern Alps, northern Italy. And from there, this animal has grown from 0 to a couple of hundreds in the whole area. The animal itself was not aware of the borders of the national park, which is here. So they moved outside of the national park and gives us an idea what happens normally. A national park, even if it's large, quite large, smaller, is not large enough for large animals. Probably also not for the smaller ones, but this is another question. So they moved out. They were poached by the Italians here in northern Italy, and they struggled with the same problems we have today, 1921. But the population has survived, was protected, is still managed, and today, canton of Grisons, where the Swiss National Park is located, you can have a managed hunting on these animals. For the red deer was different. It came back by itself, but then it was growing. He was really one of the success stories of this protected area, a red deer without disturbance from humans. The population will grow. And 1972, we had some winter dying animals. There was a wrong management on this animal. It was feeded. It was brought together in winter capturing areas. And the Swiss Boulevard newspaper, 1972, wrote 1,000 national park red deers have to die. And this was really done. If you go back just to this, you see today we have a higher population. But it was attended by numerous scientific work projects we have done, and we started to explain people how red deer behave, how they move, and what they need in winter and in summer. And today, all based on these scientific studies, we have a hunting system on 2 levels. The green one is the normal hunting until the 20th of October. And if we don't reach the management goal, we have this additional management hunting on from 20th of October on until we reached the level. There are 2 things that are important. It could be very few additional hunting. It could be more. You see it also in the last years we have done it. And it has not to be one line. It should follow a little bit a normal distribution of a population in the area. And we talk about 2,000 animals, 1,800 animals within 17,000 hectares. That's the number. And if you talk about animals, you should also talk about humans, and you should talk about habitat. That's the important thing. And 1970, the first vegetation plots were introduced. They are still there, and they are still maintained, and they give us some nice ideas on biodiversity. And one of the real crucial things in the Swiss National Park in the last 20 years is that a high amount of red deer per hectare, per square kilometers, we talk about 15 to 20 per square kilometer, increase biodiversity. And you can imagine what people from forestry, from other areas told us after we published this finding. And you must be aware that this is a summer habitat. Animals move out of the national park in winter, and a forest has no other purpose than protection and free growing, and as a recreation leisure area for visitors. There is no forestry in the area. And this allows us to have these high numbers and to say red deer density is increasing biodiversity. This map shows you the damage on the forest, but we don't know the word damage in the Swiss National Park. It's disturbance. And you see, you have some disturbance in the forest on these different species, but it doesn't really affect the sapling, the growth of the sapling. It's still there, the forest. It has grown as well, but maybe we have to think different about forest and non-forest areas. Today, we do not have only plots. We also use remote sensing with modern hyperspectral cameras, and they measure each plot of 2 by 2 meters by 300 channels and give us a signal back where we are able to measure biomass or nutrients in the whole area, and we can explain the distribution of different species over space and time in the area. Gives us new ideas, about concurrence of the species, and gives us new ideas to go further with our findings. So, as you realize, red deer plays an important role in the national parks, not only for ecology, also for the visitors. If we ask them why you are here, they look always for wildlife. 75% of our visitors, they tell us, I'm here to walk and to watch wildlife. Preserved landscape, 61, and forget about the plants. It's nothing for visitors. It's for you, maybe. 1/3 say, oh, it's nice that you have plants and nice flowers in the area. And another thing is also important, almost nobody comes to the Swiss National Park and has no idea that what he wants to see. By accident, you don't visit the Swiss National Park. That's another interesting thing. So people, they want to see animals, and you can also see it in the number of visitors. This is 28 October 2014. It's a weekend in the ratting season of red deer, and you see we have then 1,000 visitors in one single valley per day. They want to see it. They want to see bearded vulture and other animals as well. And we count them because it's an important management tool. If the tourism agency asks us, what is your benefit, what do you bring for tourism, we say, oh, we have counted 100,000 visitors, more than last year, less than last year. It's a number, so you see the systems here, and the visitor doesn't see anything. It's better for school classes. Otherwise, they could bias a little bit the number of visitors. So visitor numbers in the Swiss National Park are really managed and counted as well. Because we can offer them not a lot. As you have seen, they're not allowed to do nothing. So, and if they really do not accept our rules, we can fine them. We can give them a fine. So last year, we had one person who brought the dog. We had 5 people who missed the trail, and they pay quite a lot. It's quite expensive to leave the trail or to take a bath in one of the lakes in the Swiss National Park. Costs you about 200 euros. So you can ask yourself, what can we then offer to the visitors? And then we do the same thing every national park. Every of the 6 about 6,000 national park, offers to his visitors. We have undisturbed nature. We have unexpected encounters. We have overnight stays in the wilderness. We offer guided excursions. We offer this also for schools. We have today an application, a mobile app for everyone. We have stories to tell for young people and older people. We have a visitor centers where we try to explain natural process, which is not that easy if you do it in a building like this. We have installation for current topics, current issues, like the comeback of the brown bear. Personal story, we had a Czech au pair 2005 when the first bear came back to Switzerland after 102 years. And we had a huge media presence. And one day, my au pair asked me, but you talk only about one bear. But it was 100 years after the last one. And we had to learn, or we still have to learn people how to behave. And we have answers where the questions arise. We bring information to people, not the people to the information. And sometimes we have also carefree encounters. Just meet people. Don't talk about nature conservation. Talk about nice films in a cinema. And all this together gives us the idea that we are worth something for regional economy. And there are studies, I don't go into details how it works, but 2 independent studies in the last 15 years gave us the same numbers. The tourists visiting the Swiss National Park each summer generate an annual revenue of 19.7 million Swiss francs per year and sustain more than 200 jobs in the area. Compared with a 4 million budget of the Swiss National Park, Swiss francs, you have a return on invest 1.25. And tell me an economy area where you have this benefit out of it. Local people, Nostpark, we don't live in the German part or we are not working in the German part, we are living in the Romansh part of Switzerland, so it's a different language. Nostpark, local people, they say tourism and the national park, that's quite important. But even for the local people, preservation and protection of biodiversity are the most important drivers to give the area for nature conservation. We always think, local people are not so convinced about nature conservation. Our studies tell the contrary. They are convinced about nature conservation after 100 years, because nobody knew the area before it was national park. And it's still a lot of visited areas or visiting areas, hunting areas around the national park for local people. And it's not only a success story, the Swiss National Park. There were some backslashes, setbacks. When the Swiss National Park started, 1920, 1914, it was not allowed to drive cars in the canton of Grisons, in the area. Even there were some cars, but they were not allowed. Today, we have about 800 to 1,000 to 1 million cars per year driving through the national park. It's not according to ISA category 1, for sure not. We had the problem with hydropower. This dam is outside the national park, within the Italian national park. And the national park starts just behind. But it was a long fight to avoid that hydropower was established in the park. And today we face the problem that the water comes slowly, just a little bit, too warm actually for a natural system. And together with a monitoring system, we have now established these artificial floats. And this is against IUCN. They say, bring it away. Yeah, bring away this dam. Not so easy. So work together is probably a better solution. And if we have these artificial floods once or twice a year, then we have a near natural system of water in the area. We have still some poaching. It was, in the last decades, it was higher, but still today there are some, but it's probably for the ungulates not on a population danger level. But if you talk about brown bear or wolf or lynx, then it's a different story. This is all still important. A few words. How many minutes do I have? 5? 8, okay, to the evolution of knowledge. I told it at the beginning, you can change the mind, but you should do it with some good arguments. So when I started in the national park 20 years ago, they told me this is just a secondary level, secondary forest. It will, with the help of this nutcracker, it will go toward the climax with Pinus, Sembra, and larches in 2, 3, 4, 500 years. This is still true, but when we made this hole in the mud in an area of the Swiss National Park, we learned that in the last 8,000 years, Pinus mugo, so this secondary forest, was always dominant, 80, 40%, and this is not what I learned when I came to the national park. Or the story became another dimension. And the key thing are these kind of things, these red points, they signify a layer of carbon. So if you really go toward no intervention, we assume today that one day this forest has to burn down fully. Destroy the nice, large, and Pinus Sembra forest. And go back to the start of succession. I can tell it to you, and I have also to tell, if it burns today in the national park, the fire workers are here immediately. But we have still time. So before a human came in the area, it was 500 to 800 years. Now, after year 0, it's 300 to 500 years, the intervals. And we have no intervention since 140 years, a little bit longer than the national park, on the forest. So it's not my problem to convince people to let the fire burn. Another thing is that 95% of all the fires in our area are based on wrong human behavior. So, but these kind of things we found out, and we still explain. If we look to the future, then we have to face the problem of climate change, no discussion. And we also have already some evidence, coming back to ibex. Female ibexes have moved during the time they have their kids in a higher area during July, August, and September within the last 25 years. And we assume this is due to the vegetation situation in this time, during the time they have the kids. They have not yet adapted their system itself. We are facing comebacks of large predators. We can help for example, with scientific studies to create these migration corridors, to model them, and help so to convince people there is probably not the core areas with National Park or our area, but they are coming if WWF or other organizations support the release of these animals somewhere else, or they come back, like the wolf, by their own to the area. We have celebrated 100 years National Park, and now we are facing Strategy 2023, and a little bit reduced what Andre gave us some hints. I would like to just give you a few ideas what we are planning to do. We have to ensure and increase natural process within the park perimeters. So we want to renew the biological sewage plant of the S&P hut. We want to further remove infrastructures which are not compulsory. We still have them. Doing nothing is very difficult and very time-consuming. We want to continue an active visitor management. We want to promote natural processes, biodiversity, and ecological connectivity in cooperating with surrounding large protected areas. And coming back to one of my initial slides, within the perimeter of the Alps, and now also the USALP area, which incorporates the area around the Alps. Goals in the strategy 2023 on science and research. We would like to be a widely accepted research center. We would like to enhance and automate existing long-term monitoring systems. I said vegetation we do have for 100 years, visitors we do have for 10 years. We have to clarify about research methodologies, like experiments, bringing in nutrients in a protected area, or flying around with drones. Another nice story of this year, flying around with drones was not so successful because the eagle was attacking it. So research was not possible with drones, which was a nice experience. And the strategy for 2023 on PR and environmental education, we would like to increase public awareness on the positive effects on wilderness. Still, in the case, we strengthen the role of the Swiss National Park as ambassador for wilderness, not talk about only within the park, also talk to people outside of the park, not only create wilderness within the park, also create wilderness in gardens outside of the park. We would like to do it with new media like Facebook, Twitter, et al. We would like to establish the National Park, Swiss National Park, as an educational center, creating a new exhibition on wilderness, enhance educational activities, and replace info boards by new medias. For example, digital mobile guides. At the end, it's always the same thing. If we work on a non-intervention area, we have to convince people that a hero from 1904, a bear hunter, now is a poacher. It has changed a little bit in Switzerland. And the Swiss National Park of 1914 as a protected area is now surrounded by a set of small protected areas. All these colorful areas, perimeters, are in a kind of protection zones for species, for different species, in summer, in winter. There are there is the national park, there is a biosphere reserve, there are national protection zones on the national and departmental level. So that's just an example to protect nature. That's also one of our goals and missions we do have. So I said to you what we learned, and I can skip this and go to the end. Wildlife is a symbol of wilderness and intact nature. The visitors in the Swiss National Park want to see as many of them as possible. The focus is on red deer, ibex, chamois, golden eagle, and bearded vulture. So we have also big five. To see them today in wilderness is not self-evident. Ibex and bearded vulture were reintroduced during the last 100 years. The red deer came back by itself and profited from the undisturbed landscape of the park. Chamois and golden eagles have survived all the time. Under the protection of the Swiss National Park, the populations increased considerably. At least one research question remains for us. What happens when brown bear, wolf, and lynx will return? Thank you for your attention.